Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. As the fallout from election 2023 continues to filter its way to the ground, there's lots of loose ends that we're in the process of trying to kind of tie up and make some sense of. And those loose ends come from some of the more controversial moments during the 2023 election. There's no question that one of those highly controversial moments came from a UCP candidate, then maybe not a UCP candidate, but who she still used all the signage, and now is sitting as an independent for an indeterminate amount of time. It's all very confusing. We're going to try to make a little bit of sense of that today, and we're going to try to make some sense out of it with somebody who is pretty directly involved in the whole situation. We're talking about the Jennifer Johnson situation. We're talking about it with Jonathan Luscombe. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's awesome to chat a little bit more about what's going on over in the boonies, I guess you could say.
Well, we're going to talk about some of the positive things that are going on in the boonies, because I know that rural Alberta has certainly been, in many ways, not maybe putting its best foot forward, but there's still a lot of really good things that are going on, and I'm really excited to hear about some of those things from you. But before we get into the whole Jennifer Johnston, I should have worn my dumpster fire shirt, I feel like, but who's Jonathan Luscombe?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Again, like he said, I'm Jonathan. I'm the executive director of the Leduc Pride Society. I started it back in January of 2023, so just a few months ago. We've been kind of on a steady path of trying to fully be incorporated as a non-for-profit, which it will be Lacombe's first LGBTQ non-for-profit, and its only non-for-profit, or only LGBTQ non-for-profit, sorry. And so why I kind of started was back in January, there was an increase in a lot of anti-LGBTQ hate that I saw in the US. And a lot of the times when the US kind of goes forward with something, Canada usually has a very similar following when it leads, and it's what we're seeing now with the increase in hate against the LGBTQ community. But back then it was just starting in the US, and I kind of took that second to be like, you know what? We need to make sure that this does not happen in Canada, that this does not change our progressive nature of this country and of the province that we live in. I mean, it's definitely an uphill battle with the Conservative government here, of course, but it's definitely something I think when we make those waves and when we make those little bumps and when people start seeing it more and when more and more hate starts coming to the surface, it means that we're doing something and that we're making a difference and that we're rocking the boat that's been so still for so long. For myself, I only had come out back in 2021. I was out to a lot of my friends before that, but because of the place I lived, I didn't really want to showcase a lot more of who I was, just because I was afraid of the hate that I would receive. But thankfully, the job I had at the time was I was a server at a local cafe. And what I would do to kind of really introduce myself a little bit more to the community, as I would wear quite prominent makeup, a lot of switch out different earrings, different hairstyles, and try to introduce this idea that gender inclusivity and LGBTQ people are not just some hidden away minority, but that they are in the community, that they're just quiet because they don't want to be seen in that light or in a negative light. And just the kind of progression of that, even the introduction of some of these small town people to the first time they see a guy in makeup, it's one of those things where they go, wow, okay, that's interesting. Let's see what's up with that. Like, let's have a conversation. And some people would ask, like, why do you wear makeup? And I just go, just because I want to. And it was something that they were like, oh, That's interesting. And it flips the script of the idea indoctrination, and it's just you expressing yourself in a different form. And so, for me, I love doing that. I love kind of projecting that into the community to make sure that queer people are looked at as normal, and that the existence of LGBTQ people in your community should be seen as normal. And thankfully, my family is extremely supportive of everything I do, and it's definitely been an uphill battle for getting the city to kind of be involved a little bit more, to get the MLA to be involved a little bit more. But what we as an organization really stand by, and what I stand by, is so many people ask me why I stay in the community if there is so much increase in hate. And I always tell them, I'm like, honestly, if I could stay in this community, if I could chip away at every little aspect of these stereotypes and change one person's life or change one person's opinion, to keep them from saying the F slur while they're driving down the road when they see some kid wearing makeup or wearing a dress, or something that's not the gender stereotype, that they will think twice about that, because there's kids right now in the LGBTQ community that, and I was one of them, that thought, you know what, it's probably better if I kill myself than to exist like this in the community, and to have so much hate thrown at me, and to be hated by almost an entire society because of the way things were going. It's taking so many steps backwards, and everything like that. So I think for me, with where I had kind of gone into my journey of self-discovery and self acceptance, was a long time ago when those things started happening to me, but it did take a toll. It took a very big toll. And so now that I am confident in and of myself, and of my gender and my sexual orientation, and just who I am as a person, I can take these things. People can get it at me, and I'd much rather people shout these things at me knowing that I am who I am fully, than if they go and attack these kids that are still discovering themselves. That could be extremely detrimental to both their mental and physical health. And that's kind of the way that I view what Jennifer Johnson's statements were, is that it's inconsiderate of people. It's not. And anyways, we'll get onto that. But yeah, but anyways, our society is growing and making change, and there's things in this community that I never thought would actually happen. Like, the city lit up one of its monuments in pride colors, which I thought was nuts. They posted on their social media and everything, which was awesome. We've had a massive turnout for our open house that we had at the beginning of the month. And then we're going to be in the Luscombe Days Parade, or the first queer float that will ever be in the Luscombe Days Parade. So we're excited for that. It's definitely a big step forward, but we're excited to be introduced to the community on a bigger level, and on a level where we're saying, you know what, even though this MLA is here, we are making sure we are seen and heard and looked at as humans. And honestly, I'm really proud of where this has gone and the momentum that it's picked up. And even in and of myself, like, I never thought I'd be able to do something like this. I always knew I wanted to make a change in my community. I always wanted to make somewhat of a difference, so that people could feel safer and feel more connected to the place they call home. And so I hope I get to do that, and I hope I'm an advocate for that. And I hope that I keep getting to introduce myself more and more to people, as it's something that I really love to meet people. I love to interact with people. I love politics. I honestly love your guys' show. Like, your guys are 90% of my information that I find out there. Like,
Oh, danger.
my social media. I think you guys were, when the Leduc situation had come up, you guys were the first person that I saw the video on, and I was like, oh, okay, fun times. And I think that was the same day I reached out to you. So I was like, you know what? We need to talk about some things. Anyways, that's a little bit about me, but in the society.
I got to ask before we move on to the cookie conversation. Um, how the float that you guys are putting in the Lacombe Days, scale of 1 to 10, how much fabulousness can people expect?
Oh, we are excited for this. We have a full trailer, a truck where we have a 30-foot rainbow arch being put on there. We're decorating the entire outside with rainbow flags. We have pride flags. We are giving away full pride flags. We are giving away candy, flyers to our Pride weekend in August. There's going to be banners, bubbles, confetti, everything that you could imagine, and just the loudest music. We're ready to just turn up the party and get people. And it's, the thing is, it's not Lacombe Days Parade is not something small. It is, for the community, is one of the biggest events of the year. We full out come on out, and there, I think roughly last year with my job, they had portioned little cookies, and they did about 6,000 cookies, and they, before the halfway through the parade, they ran out of cookies, and they still had none left for the end of the parade. So it's definitely something we're excited for, and we're ready to make sure that all the glitter and all the flags are full on display. And oh, I think one of my board members' kids will also be dressed as a unicorn. So that will be fun, in an inflatable unicorn costume. So we're making sure that this is going to be a float that people will remember. That's for sure.
I hope tag us in some pictures because I would love to be able to amplify that stuff. Let's talk about the provincial election. So we've got Jennifer Johnson. The nomination process in Lacombe Pinoco was a spicy little meatball because there were some folks that ran that had some thoughts about some things. But tell me what your experience was like. When did the problematic uh, hate speech, I guess, when did that kind of bubble up on your radar?
I think honestly, um, the way that we had, or I had found out, is I actually know Jennifer Johnson. I have some sort of. I acted with her kids in a drama, and I've only met her a few times. As of that, we've just like shaken hands, or she's told me, great job in this or whatever. And I'm a very, I would say I'm a very empathic person. I think it's because of my neurodivergence, is that it's very much of something that I will go up to someone, and if I just get a bad vibe, I'm out. Like, I'm just like, no. And usually it's pretty good. I try not to judge based off of that. So when I saw Jennifer Johnson running for the UCP nomination, I definitely thought at first, that it was kind of a refreshing thing, as Ron Orr was not someone that I thought was a good MLA. He was never in the community, never really did much. He just had the chair and got the money, and that was about it. And I was not appreciative. He never responded to things. He didn't even show up. I think we had the Chamber of Commerce put on a massive gala, one of the biggest in Lacombe, and he didn't even attend. So, and Blaine Calkins attended. So it was one of those things where I was excited for, hopefully, and I knew the UCP were the front runners in our writing. Is something that it's like, I think last time they won by like an 84% margin or something around that number. Like, it was an insane amount of that. And even this time, I think it was still 74. But when I kind of first heard it, I was volunteering with the NDP. I loved our candidate, Dave. I thought he was a great candidate. He advocated for the queer community a lot. Like, any event that we had, he'd show up to. He was like, since the first time I saw him was at the museum. Had I'm a volunteer at the museum here, and they had an appreciation night for the volunteers and stuff, and they invited some of the candidates and things to come to the AGM. It was kind of like a mix, and he had shown up, and we had great conversations about stuff, and there was a lot of people talking and chatting with him. So he was a great candidate in the sense of he was out in the community, and he was making sure that he was being seen and heard, which is not what I can say for Jennifer Johnson. But he definitely was really out there, really talking and really getting going on that. So I was really appreciative of the effort that they did to kind of strengthen the bond of their relationship to Luscombe, because it was something that was very tainted after the first time the NDP was in, and still is. Like, you'll see the comments. I had posted an invitation on our community page to the grand opening of the office. I think within an hour, I had 118 comments on there just saying how stupid she was, how dumb it was, how like stupid in the head I was. Like, there was a lot. I had to take it down just because it was getting too much, and it was something that I was like, I don't want to garner so much hate for this. I was like, I just want them to be, to come out and enjoy themselves. It was just an event. So it was definitely something. But one of the first things that he had said, because I asked him if he had met Jennifer Johnson, and he said no, but he said that he had checked out all the candidates' websites. And one of the first things on her website was women should be barefoot in the kitchen. And they had since taken it down after I had found out about this, because I tried finding it, but he showed me a screenshot that he'd taken of her website. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I started doing a little bit more digging, and after she won the nomination, I had a few people reach out to me asking about some of the things that I knew about it, and or I knew about her. And one of them was a fellow. I won't name him out though if he wants to be, but he was one of the youth advocates here in Lacombe for the Muslim population here, and he wanted to sit down and have a conversation because she had previously, in the last year, had just said nasty things about multiculturalism, about turbans, about anything that had to do with immigration and things like that. There was a lot of negativity behind, and she agreed with like Donald Trump's turban ban in government and all this stuff that she showed, and it was completely wiped after she won the nomination. Her page, I think, has like 4 posts on it at this point, and the last one before the Ponoka Stampede was from the election, May 29th, and she didn't post till a few days ago for something else. But that was the first time I kind of heard some suspicious things about her. And my mom knows her a little bit better, as she was like on the mom board when we were doing drama as kids. And she even said that she was like, I don't know. I was like, this seems a little sketch. And so we were all on the fence about this person now that I started figuring out more and more stuff about her. And I think, when was the time? I think it was after I had chatted with one of the other candidates, Dusty, because I knew of the fact that this town would probably vote conservative. I chose to try and amplify someone that I thought would be a extremely good candidate, and Dusty Maisherel was one of those. He was a farmer in a community, but he had been an EMS driver for 7 years. He was super supportive of both queer initiatives. He had even reached out when the Pride crosswalk in Ponoka had been vandalized. He'd reached out to me if I had a contact so that he could go help them paint it. And all that fun stuff. And he was honestly one of the people that I knew would be a strong advocate for this community. So when the nomination contest came around, I was surprised to hear that she had won quite by a landslide. And there was a little bit of a scandal that kind of went on with that. I'm not sure how accurate it was, but it was definitely something that was like, they had said that someone had sent out information to his supporters that the voting was on a different night, and that it was not on that night that it was happening. So a lot of his supporters that were in the UCP did not show up, so they could not vote. And then the actual amount of people, I think he said, that could vote, or that like could vote on the nomination, was about 800 or something around that number. He said there was 1,300 votes at the end of the night, which he found very strange because there was not that many people to have that many votes. And afterwards, his campaign manager's car and his girlfriend's car got vandalized. I think his girlfriend's car got vandalized twice. Yeah, because I had chatted with them when they came in to my work, and because they'd come in all the time, and I asked them how it went, and they were just like, we're done. Like, the one guy had said he'd worked for the Conservative campaign office here in Lacombe for 7-8 years, and this was the one time that he was like, I cannot do this anymore. He's like, this is not the UCP that we were projecting. This was not the UCP that this community thinks it is. But he just didn't know how to get that information out to people because they weren't listening, and there's not an active communication of that. So as she won the nomination, and I think she won the nomination halfway through April, she started knocking on doors and stuff and doing all these things, and I think it came out in the second week of May, if I'm not mistaken. I think I honestly woke up to everyone just texting me like, "Did you see what she said?" And I was like, "What?" And I had to do kind of like a recon to see how my team was doing, because I was like, oh God. So I checked in. We were all furious. We were fuming at these things, that this was hidden for so long. And so I started doing some research on it. And of course, like, I think one of the first papers that I had saw about it was the Calgary Herald. And we had shared that post onto the community page that we had. And again, like a couple in an hour, there was people claiming that it was false, claiming that it was taken out of context, that it was about the US, that it was not about Canada, that it was about this, that it was about that the recording wasn't even there, that it was the NDP that had said these things and leaked this stuff, and that they weren't showing this information, yada yada yada. And I was just like, does that matter? Like, does you really need to hear this recording to know that this comes from an accurate source? And so I think I don't know who released it, but I found it eventually and shared it on that same community page. And again, like, that post didn't garner much, but people were still saying like, oh, that was about the US and that, this, that, and that. And I was like, do you not hear what she is saying in that audio? That is utterly appalling. It's not only word for word what the Calgary Herald had put in their article, it was 10 times worse than what I thought. I had to stop halfway through because I was like shaking at the point. I was like, how dare a person run for political office with this rhetoric and this hate behind an entire community of people that deserve to, there's someone there protecting them. And I was not happy, for sure. And she really didn't say anything to any ends of it. So we were kept kind of going as if we were trying to, our approach on the steps was to, again, make sure that we are communicating the NDP stuff right, but also making other people aware of some of the things that was going on, because a lot of people were still not aware that she had said these things because they weren't receiving the information behind it. And so we decided just to kind of keep pushing forward and seeing what we could do to say something against it. Unfortunately, like, it just kept kind of wanting to be shoved under the rug. People were wanting to push it away and wanting to be, and I was like, no. I was like, I'm going to make sure that this is not what we are doing, because we are not sweeping this under the rug. We're not moving past this. So I had sent her a message privately over Facebook, and just inviting her to sit down with myself and chat about some of the things, so I could help her understand more about the queer community and more about that. The first time I sent the message, I was left on read. It was not replied to. And then I kept kind of, going on and being like, oh, okay, well, maybe she's busy, or yada, yada, yada. Again, like, nothing. So I tried emailing her, and again, nothing. And this was all before the election. So this was things that, when you're trying to run for office, you need to be communicating quite prominently and fastly when you're a candidate. Yet I think she knew that she had this in the bag, and that she was not going to lose it. And that's where I think the decision of the UCP was a cop-out, was just a way of saying, well, we know that riding is ours. We know that riding is conservative. So if we just tell the community, oh, hey, she's not really in it, they're still going to vote for her because it's a conservative candidate. It even said on the ballot still UCP candidate, which I was kind of like, and then election night came, and we were watching, the election results at the office. And I think she had garnered about 7,000 more votes than Dave, which, again, not surprising, but the sheer amount of people that voted for her was was the shocking part, was because I was like, did we not share this information? Like, how did we get to this point? And I remember one of the interviews I had, I think it was with CTV. I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly. The gentleman asked me, like, or he went around, and I watched the news video later, and he went around to other people in the city and asked them, like, did you know this is what she said? And they're like, oh, no, I had no idea. And it was one of those things where, like, a lot of people just didn't know. And I honestly think that's because of the amount of disconnect within our community, because Lacombe County is so large, and because there's so many farms or rural areas, there's not an accurate communication of information. Not only that, the fact that there's not internet in a lot of these rural, very far out spaces is something that works in the Conservatives' favor. That's why I was trying to push for more people to see that there was going to be broadband internet with the NDP. And, it's a promise, so you never know if it's going to happen or not. But it was still something that I was like, well, at least this is something that would help bring information to people in rural communities at a faster rate than if they received it by a newspaper, which I think in Alberta we have at least 7 or 8. We have the most amount of conservative news sources in Canada, which is shocking. I didn't find that out until I did some more research about that, which I thought was really interesting, that there's so many. But they're all paper or like very easy accessible documents for people that don't have internet. So it's one of those things, you go to the store, you see one of the papers there. Like, I think Domino's Pizza has Rebel News sitting on their counter, and the same thing with where's the other one I went to? I think it was another fast food restaurant or something like KFC or A&W, around that number. They have it just sitting on the counter. And I'll pick them up every once in a while, and I'll show them to my friends, because we just laugh. We just laugh at some of the things. It's just like, okay, well, sounds good. But no, and so as time went on, and after she had won the election, I sent another message, because, again, I was curious of where she stood, and left on red yet again. Was not replied to. Was not even like, hey, like, you need some time to figure out the election results, whatever. Nothing. Which was shocking, because Leduc Pride hadn't received anything either, and we were all just like in the dark about what was going on. We're like, okay, there's just nothing here to talk about, I guess. And so it became harder and harder to try and have a conversation with her about this stuff, and to try and really introduce or debunk some of the ideas that she had put forward. And even in her apology, it wasn't an apology. It was just a saying of like, well, I did some work and now I'm good, because she said she was going to work with our societies and the community, but there was none of that. There was no talking for over a month. We were very confused as to where she was, even as she doesn't even live in our riding. She lives outside of the riding. But we were just utterly confused about how this was going to play out, and how she was going to talk with us if she's leaving us on red. As like the month kind of kept going on, for June, I think second week of June, or third week of June, around that number, I got a private message on my Facebook, on my personal Facebook, inviting me to sit down with Jennifer Johnson the next day. And it's one of those things where I was like, okay, I mean, I don't really have time. It's the middle of Pride Month. I'm a Pride Society director. It's the biggest month of the year for us to do these things. I was like, I'm going to have to chat with my board and just see where we're at. And then they had come back and been like, okay, well, these dates work for us. And I think it was the 30th, the 9th, and the 11th. So the 9th of July and the 11th of July, and then the 30th or something around that. And for one, Pinoca Stampede was the parade was on the 30th. So we were like, we can't do that. And then, like, I had originally thought that it was my entire board that could come with me, because I don't feel comfortable really going by myself with the way that UCP has done their own things. And the person that had even reached out to me was a UCP supporter, and she was her administrator. And she had said that because she's so new, her administrator is going to be with her because she has no idea what she's doing. And I just kind of think to myself, I'm like, should you be in government if you don't know what you're doing? I was like, okay, well, I'll give it to you. Everyone can kind of go into politics. You don't really have to have an experience with it, but having the experience is usually an asset when you're trying to make sure that your community is actually supportive of you. Um, and so when she had sent that private message, or the person, and I was just a little taken aback. I was just like, I mean, I can't just drop everything to have a meeting with you. I'm like, you haven't talked with us for over a month and a half, and I don't know what to say. And so we've been in open talks about having a meeting. We're still trying to figure out a time that works for everyone on my board, and that's going to make sure that they're there to ask their questions. And we've set guidelines. We've been like, if she doesn't agree that trans rights are human rights, then we're out of there. We don't want to talk about it. If that is the line for you, if you will not stand up for a basic human right for a very marginalized group, or if you stumble over that thought, or you think, oh, well, maybe I'll just have a conversation about this. And it's like, no, it's not up for debate. It is human rights. And the fact that you could let that sway what you say to a pride organization, or how you go about your constituency and everything like that. Like, it was something that we were like, okay, well, we need to have a conversation. That's a given, but the conversation, I don't know how well it would go. And so over the next few weeks, I had, of course, people reaching out to me. I don't know if you know who or what Cilantro and Chive is. It's a pretty prominent restaurant in Luscombe, and has roots tied within Pinoca as well. And there is a Red Deer store too. But the owner I know quite personally, and he had said one day that he had reached out to her because he was hearing a lot of news about things, that investing opportunities that were going out the window, people saying they were going to boycott Lacombe because of our voting and how large we voted her in for. And she came the next day and reassured him that she was talking with our societies, talking with us. And I was like, she's not. I was like, we could barely can meet up. Like, there's not so much, because he had asked me, it was like, is this true? And I was like, not really. I was like, she's been very avoidant of us and our endeavors to kind of introduce more or forward thinking, or not even forward thinking, just human decency. And so again, like, kind of keep moving forward. I had then heard from the Lacombe Chamber of Commerce executive director, and he had said that she had not so much as even reached out to him, and he was asking me if he could join our meeting, because he knew we had one being scheduled. If he asked me if he could join our meeting to meet her, because she had not so much as reached out to him. And I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, but that's unfortunate that you can't even meet with your MLA as the Lacombe, because he had also said that investors and stuff were pulling, and they were saying, well, we're not really wanting to invest in Lacombe because of this person that has such hateful rhetoric. Like, why would we want that on our docket? It's not going to look good in any of the other parts of Alberta or any parts of Canada, to be honest. And so, and then I think the most recent thing that had happened was there was a Chamber of Commerce event, and it was like an after hours thing, like a 6 to 8 or something. And it was different community groups. They had tables there to promote some of their things, and everyone was invited or whatever. And there was kind of like a small group of people. But one of the people that was there was Jennifer Johnson. This was the first time I'd really seen her in Lacombe, and the first time I'd seen her at an event that was not a Stampede or not a Conservative or UCP event. It was very independent of that. And she saw me instantly and came right over to me. The first thing she says to me is, I hope you know those words were taken out of context. And I just stand there stunned, because I'm like, okay. I mean, I heard the recording. I was like, I don't think that's true. And it went on, and it was still that it's the very defensive thing, and things kept we kept talking. We chatted about her kids and stuff, and I kept it very cordial, as I didn't want to rock anything or ruin an opportunity to talk with her in person with the rest of my board. But was still something I was fuming over after I left, because again, it was just deflection of all these things. And the one thing I had pointed out to her was that in Canada, puberty blockers do not cause infertility. They do not. It is, if you look it up, it's an easy Google search, honestly. And they don't cause infertility in children. And then for hormone therapy, that doesn't start till you're 18. If you're 16 or 17, you can get parental consent from your parents, but that is it. That is the only way that you can get those hormones, because those do alter the things, but that's because when you're 18, you can still make those decisions full well knowing the consequences of it. But there's a lot of studies out there that say that even, I think there's 1% of people, 1% say that they regret having gender affirming surgery. And that's compared to like 4% saying that they regret having children. So there's one of those things that there's relations with everything, and there's always someone that's going to regret something. Like someone who takes performance enhancing drugs, they might regret that later on. Like I'm sure that having even some of those on them, they probably will never do it again. Like I want to bring up Brittany Griner, as like that was like she'll probably never do that again, and never think to bring something like that to any other country outside of Canada or outside the US. So I think when it came to and I literally told her this, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I was like, then why were you making comments on it? And why are you making these things, and why are you saying these things if you don't know anything about it? She just kind of looked at me, and I was like, yeah, sounds about right. So it's definitely an interesting and ongoing conversation. It's been ongoing for a month and a half. And my board is entirely exhausted from trying to consistently figure out a date that works for us and works for her, and yada, yada, yada. But then, we see her at the Pinoca Stampede. We see her over here, over there, and everywhere. And we're just like, okay. But you can't have a sit-down conversation with my board. You can't come to any one of our events that we've invited you to and talk about things. And of course, I wouldn't show up to a Pride event if I had said those things either. But I'd still make an effort and try to figure out some of why people were upset with the things I had said. But no, it's definitely, there's not a lot of movement on their part to make things better, or to have that open conversation. We are open to, again, still meeting and still chatting about everything that has happened, and really giving her resources and things on how to improve some of the ideas that she has. But that has to come on her end as well. We can't be consistently pushing all this stuff on her, saying you need to do this, you need to do that. But if she doesn't take the steps to do it, then it shows where she still stands, even after information has come out that said those things are false. And I think, honestly, the kitty litter one disturbs me the most, because she took a very unfortunate truth from the US, which was that schools have a bucket of kitty litter in the corner in case of mass shootings, and so that the kids can go to the bathroom in the classroom while it's locked down. So I was like, you took a very unfortunate truth. And I told her this to her face. I was like, you took a very unfortunate truth and turned it into a very unfortunate lie that was damaging, not for just one group of people, but was damaging for teachers, for schools, for children all around. Like you called people feces. Like that's not excusable. And even the people I had asked her, I was like, who are the people you were talking to? Because they seem very supportive of your ideas. And she was like, oh, I have no idea. Just a group of like 10 people or something. But I go, sometimes a group of 10 people are the most influential people. I was like, if you don't know who those people are, why are you saying things that could potentially harm other people, but also that give you a good standing with that group, full well knowing that group was going to be supportive of what you were going to bring to the table? So you can't really tell me that she didn't know who they were, because the people there, if they really cared about politics or understanding or were a decent human, they would not clap and applaud at things like being called feces or relating children to like literal pieces of poop in cookies. And so it was definitely something that we've been trying to figure out how we advocate for the queer community while also making sure that other people in this community understand what is going on without, absolutely blasting her, because it's still a conservatively based system here. It's still a very conservative rooted and religiously rooted community that is hard to really get information to or to get people to listen to you about it. So yeah, I'm talking for so long, but that's kind of a little bit of what's all been going on with our communication with her and everything around that. So
A couple of things I want to sort of expand on a little bit. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned that I saw similarly reported in media was, when reporters would go through that constituency and say, "Hey, what'd you think?" A lot of people were like, "Holy hell, I didn't know that." Um, do you think that, like, do you feel like the fact, given that, do you feel like the fact that 70%, 74% of the constituency voted for her is maybe being blown a little bit out of proportion, given that there are so many people who didn't know? Like, for the reactions that I've seen from folks that have been interviewed, it seems like a lot of people, that would have been a deal breaker potentially. And Luscombe is, I mean, you talked about Luscombe as a community. It's getting hit for investment. It's getting a lot of negative press. Do you think some of that's maybe a little bit unfair given the lack of available information?
mhm. um, I do think that it is. I think it's that a lot of people just didn't know. And when it comes to election time in Alberta, particularly, and even in Lacombe, because Lacombe is very subjugated into its own individual groups. Like Lacombe, to so many people, is viewed as a white town, is viewed as an old person town. But that's because Berman University, one of the university that's here in town, they have an extremely big BIPOC population on their campus from all over the place. Like a lot of them are from Bermuda, from the Bahamas, and countries where that they're flying to Lacombe to go to this university. But they don't venture down past Berman University because they are scared of what could happen if they go to downtown Lacombe. And are scared of the things in the community. And the same thing with the Muslim community is that there's quite a big Muslim population here as well. But when they had opened up their mosque, it was quite controversial and people were not happy about it. But it was something that was like, hey, these are just a religious group of people. Why are we being so upset about it? And some of the stuff is warranted. That some of those people, that number was very, some people just voted because of it, because I know for a fact that the museum here I know the museum executive director, and she's an amazing person, and she decided to do an Every Child Matters display in the museum. And it's not a political thing, it's our history. It's something that I think we need to stop relating to political, and we need to start looking as it's actually humans and it's actually people that this has happened to, and that we need to stop politicizing it past the point of looking past their humanity. So she really wanted to break down some of those barriers and introduce some more Indigenous stuff to Lacombe. She said when that had come out, she said she got emails upon emails of people just saying that you can't do this, like this is inappropriate, like this is not okay, you're shaming white people, all this fun stuff. And she kept kind of just going through it with it. She had the support of the organization. She had support of the Lacombe Historical Society. And when the actual thing came out, I think she said that there was one person that showed up to be upset about it. And she stayed for like 10 minutes and then left. So it was something that there is a lot of hidden hate towards groups. It's very much from the perspective of just like people behind their phones just spewing stuff. But again, like, I am just shocked at the amount of people that didn't know this information as But I think because we're such a close-knit community, because we still focus less on the news and focus more about people, we're not so inclined to research things that we hear. We're not so inclined and because it was a very small group of people that this affects, that these comments really relate to, people's For You pages and things that are mostly conservative are not going to show these things. That's the way the algorithms have always worked, is that if you post liberal, if you post conservative, it amplifies those things, and it amplifies the things that you are more likely to read about. And so I think because there's the lack of information spread through Luscombe, because we're such a close-knit community between individual people, because there's such a divide between all the different diversity groups within Luscombe, I think the communication of things was just so blotchy and so misconstrued that there was not an accurate source that people could go to find out about this. And some people have very strong opinions about the Calgary Herald and stuff like that, or other news industries like CBC or CTV, and they might relate back that they're biased. And so that's why I really wanted to push. I think the same week that they published a Jennifer Johnson thing, we had our an article about us on the next page in the local newspaper, and we just talked about it. We didn't want it to be about Jennifer Johnson, so we talked more about what we were doing as part of our initiatives and stuff. And we got quite a lot of people responding to that, as it was something that people just got on their doorsteps in Luscombe. So I think, again, it really came down to who was reporting it, how it was being communicated, and the resources that the people trust in Luscombe, because they trust the Luscombe Express. That's our newspaper here. So I don't think they posted anything in it until after the election about what she had said. So it was one of those things where the ability to have that access was very slim. And I think there was a blog person, her name was Linda Huang, and she had come to Luscombe with the Luscombe Tourism to do just touring around Luscombe and stuff. But she had emailed me the week before, and she had said that she was actually tempted to break it off because she didn't want to support Luscombe because of the MLA that was here. So I was able to convince her to come to Luscombe. I gave her some insights about what businesses were supporting Jennifer Johnson's and stuff like that, and really made her aware of some of the ways that she could try. And she talked with Luscombe Tourism, and they agreed that they were going to make it about Pride. So they were able to interview us. She came and chatted with us about some of the stuff that's going on in Luscombe, and about supporting Grant. It was extremely nice to see that because of this stuff, and because of the lack of communication, because of the lack of actual community connection, it's creating a lot of good for the people here in Luscombe. And I don't want to say that everyone was unaware of what she had said, because I had talked with a city council member who had said that the constituents that she knew had said sometimes it based off of some of the people that walked with her would tell her things, and said that they would actually have the conversation about trans stuff at the door while they were knocking. So the people would ask them questions about it, and she would continue to go on and talk about why, or et cetera, and all this stuff. But she would specifically select people that only asked about it, or that she knew were supporters of her campaign, and would talk about it then, which I found out, and I was only about a couple days ago, and I was like, oh, I thought it was just an audio recording. So she had even believed it up to the point of when she was campaigning on doors. So there's not a thing of there's an excuse for that. So there is people that are just literally transphobic in this town, but I think the amount and the sheer amount of people is far less than what that percentage amounted to, and just boils down to, and even on election day, she still had UCP as her person. So anyone that looks at that, hearing maybe a candidate in Lacombe said something homophobic, oh, maybe they'll be gone. Maybe they won't be on the ballot, yada, yada, yada. Maybe they replaced the person because they told her it was going to be an independent MLA. So a lot of the times, it's not even so much the miscommunication, it's the miscommunication of who it was about, because that's the thing that will get you if it's about, because I think when the NDP pulled people from the public forums in the rural communities, it just blew up. Everyone was like, why are they gone? Why aren't they here? Why are they doing this? And I was like, and it was amplified. So I think the other side of that too is that because this province has been so rooted in a conservative government, that conservative stuff is pushed towards the front, and a lot of liberal stuff is towards the back and doesn't get seen as much, or doesn't get seen as prominently or pushed as prominently. And so when that had blown up, I was like, why are we blowing this up when she had said literal transphobic comments? And even the questions at the forum, I knew people that were going to ask that question. It never came up when she was there. And she was pulled from the Pinocchio forum, so no one that could ask her. So there's people that were even running the political side of an independent campaign that were still siding with her and not really wanting to talk about these things. So it's a mix of both. And I think because, again, like, this community is just not well communicating, it in turn makes it difficult for people to come across information, especially when the group that's trying to push this information is a very small group of people. And a lot of people do not like them solely because of how they identify. So why would they listen to them about one of their favorite political groups? So it's an imbalance of communication and just bigotry. But again, yeah, I do agree that the sheer amount was just not indicative of what Lacombe is, as we really care about the person. And like, I've had neighbors do stuff for us that, is just really awesome. And, we'll shovel our driveway. We'll, like, one of our board members' houses has been vandalized 6 times this month. She shows pride flags and stuff all over her house and does everything like that, and has been vandalized. She's had about $300 worth of stuff stolen off of her property. And it's sad. But it's awesome to see that her neighbors, for the first time it got stolen, she has a rainbow arch, and they had, as soon as they saw that it was stolen, they bought her a new one and sent it to her house. And people came and just put flags in the trees for her, put stuff on the lawn, and just added to her pride display because they knew of what had happened. And they were not making a big fuss about it. They weren't going and shouting at the top of their lungs. They were just saying, this person needs us, and we want to be there for that person, without making a whole kerfuffle about it, without the whole community being, because there was going to be a point, like, we had a global national interview, and she was showcased on there and talked about some of the stuff that had happened, which I was extremely happy about, because she deserved to have that story be out there a little bit more. And as much as I love doing news articles and things and talking about why I do this stuff, I needed more people to see that this community is still very rooted in a lot of hate, but it's a very ballsy group that I'd say has this hate, and that most of the time they just are too, what's the word? I want to say cocky, but too much, and they think that they can just get away with things. And I think that also shows kind of when you elect a political leader that has these things, that has this rhetoric, it leads the way for other people to think that they can do that same thing, that they can hate on a group, that they can marginalize another group of people, because the person that is their voice, that's a voice for over a couple thousand people, is saying that it's okay that trans people are homophobic, like, that their existence should not even be a thing. And people go, yeah, like, our MLA is saying it, we all agree. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's a blind following of conservatism, where they don't think for themselves, they don't do the research, they don't even look past, like, the Leduc thing was the thing that really like made me mad, was because I was like, if you do a Google, like a simple Google search, you'll figure it out that those colors do not mean any of those, or not even that. Like, it's based off of like how you related a color to these things. I was very confused about. I was like, seems kind of reaching, aren't we?
Just a
So I
little bit.
think, yeah, I think it's just a little bit, right? So I think it's just based off of, but no, like, even with a political leader that says these things, it opens the room for more violence, and it lets people get away with it and do it without feeling like they're going to actually get consequences eventually. So yeah, I think Lacombe is a little bit behind in its thinking, but I think that there is a movement coming, and that these people in the communication of information, now that we're in and we keep going, and now that there's a completely new switch, that there's a new opposition party, there's all these things, I think there's going to be a lot more information that's going to be shared readily, and that there's going to be more people finding out about these things ahead of time. And I hope that that keeps being the thing. Like, us and Pinoca Pride, we've like collaborated on making sure that people know about this stuff, and we try to do as much supporting of each other as we can, because we know the importance of that and what it does to the leaders. It scares them when groups are in unity. So we know for a fact that we are making big waves, and that we're rocking very peaceful boats of religious ideals in this community, and it's causing people to wake up, but also causing people to be a little bit mad at us. So I think we're finding out who the people in this community are, slowly but surely, over time.
I'm curious. I mean, you talked earlier about the misinformation that Jennifer Johnson had, where you talked with her about the puberty blockers, and you talked with her about the hormone replacement therapy, and the mis and disinformation that exists in regards to how, whether or not kids can access this stuff, whether or not kids can access this stuff without parental consent and permission. There's a lot of mis and disinformation that apparently she was unaware of. Do you think, given the profile that she inadvertently created for herself by saying dumb shit, do you think that she has a responsibility, not just as like an elected official, but as a human being, to clarify that stuff? Like, does Jennifer Johnson have a responsibility to say, hey, you know what, everybody? I believed all this batshit crazy stuff. Sorry, turns out it's batshit crazy stuff. Here's what the actual information is. I apologize that I shared bad information. Do you think she has a responsibility to do that as part of the, I don't know, reconciliation process for her and the community that she purportedly wanted to serve?
No, 100%. I think that the image that she's made has honestly screwed herself over. That these things, but that her silence on a lot of it has spoken more volumes than anything else. The quiet brushing of it, or the letting it go kind of idea, that like the UCP, they won't say things when something happens, and they'll let it blow over, and then someone might bring it up in a news conference, and then they go, well, that was a long time ago. And it really wasn't. It was literally September that these things happened in. And the same thing with the election. It was like, I think people heard about it, knew about it, forgot about it. But for us and for this community of people, we never forget about it, because those are things that every time we look at you, we know that you hate us. And so, yeah, like, I think as a leader, honestly, I think as a leader, you should take the responsibility to step down after seeing what you have done to a community of people that you have hurt so inadvertently, but not also that you've not talked to, not related to, not been in communication with. That's a part of your constituency and a part of your writing. You should be able to say, as someone who is just a decent human, if you are a decent human, I'm sorry, I don't think this is the right position for me. I will step down and let someone who uses their voice to advocate for everyone be the leader, because my beliefs don't align with a lot of the things. And it's not, I honestly think that the idea that admitting to your beliefs, but also seeing what it does to other people is important, because I do believe that everyone has a right to think the way they think. If you want to believe that the queer community is indoctrinating children, go ahead and believe it. But do your research first. Ask people about it. Communicate. Learn. Like, just ask for knowledge instead of automatically assuming that all these political leaders that align with your beliefs agree and have all this great information about you, when it's not true. When they come out and say these things, and you're like, none of that was true. Not one of it was true. Not a stitch of it. And you don't even admit to that. You just say that it's an issue you want to talk about. But that it's not an issue that even exists. It's an issue that you're creating in your own psyche that's a problem to you, or that somehow you've learned about information from some source. Honestly, I probably would believe it'd be Ron DeSantis or something like that. And she'd just learn, like, be like, oh yeah, he said it, so it's probably true, and then take it off and keep running with it. I mean, we know where Danielle sits with Ron DeSantis, so I mean, that's always fun. So I would not be that surprised if those same ideas and beliefs trickled down into her caucus, because when someone believes someone that's so hateful, someone that's so disgusting is a great political leader, they have not only issued, the Human Rights Organization has issued a travel advisory, not only to just queer people, but to queer, BIPOC, Indigenous, anyone that is marginalized, to stay away from Florida, because it's literally a hellscape for any minority to even exist in. And it's sad, because I understand the significance of wanting to stay in your home, because that's where you grow up. That's where you've always lived. That's where you feel like you belong. And when someone's attacking your very existence solely for not something that you can change, and you have to leave your home because of it, is devastating, in my opinion. And the fact that these political leaders do not see that and pick and choose what things they think are right and true from what he says is disgusting, because you should be able to do your own research. You should be able to look at the people that are having to be evacuated from here and moved to other places, and you should be able to say, oof, yeah, that's not a good idea. That's not a good person to support. Like, why are we supporting this? So I think, in and of itself, I honestly don't think that she should be the MLA in this community. I 100% believe there's so many other amazing candidates that could have done so much better for the community. Even some of the independent MLA, or sorry, the Alberta Party MLA, Miles, was an extremely strong advocate for people. He has been running to be this MLA for a few times, and because it's the Alberta Party, they don't have a lot of momentum behind them. But I think if he was really to push for change and to really own the independence, I think that he could really change the narrative behind a conservative movement in this town, and could really go like, well, that's a very old type of conservatism. Because honestly, I don't think NDP will be able to get in here for another at least 8 years. It's impossible to try and change some image. And looking at the sheer amount of people that didn't vote NDP and voted conservative, it's going to take a little while for it to really, or something big like this, to affect it. But we even now see that something big like this does not affect it. And so I think it would speak volumes to say, hey, like, my own opinions and my beliefs, I don't know. Like, I honestly think, like, again, if she wants to believe that, go right ahead. But don't be a political leader and harm the community that those things are not even true about. Talk with them first. Like, it's not so hard to reach out and be like, hey, I've heard this. Is this true? And, some organizations might lie, but what do queer people have to lie about? Like, we're already hated enough. I don't think we want to lie anymore to be hated still. So it's one of those things where we're always going to try and make sure that people understand that we do not care about what you believe, but it's how you use that belief to affect what you're doing. Because if you're changing the country to align specifically with your belief, you're not doing what this country is about. Even if I was a political leader, if I was a political person, I would not use my own beliefs to shun an entire community. I would not say things that would harm other communities unless it was warranted, unless it was like you're being hateful, you're being angry towards this group of people for no reason. But I would still allow people's voice to be heard, and for their like, even take back Alberta, whatever. Like, if you want your voice heard, I will still listen, but it doesn't guarantee that I'm going to side with you because of some of the things that are just hateful that they do. Um, and that's not my personal belief. That's just a human decency belief. It's just the belief that everyone should have the right to still have their voice, but it's whether or not that voice is going to affect people in a negative way. And I think as a leader, you need to be able to determine that. You need to be able to look at these communities and some of the things that you said and go, okay, that could really harm someone. Should I be the voice for them, or should I really go into that community and learn how to better understand who they are? Because it's the same thing with the Muslim community. So many religions, Christianity just shuns and hates the Muslim community because of it's solely different from the Christian community. But a lot of Muslim people or a lot of Christian people do not know a lot about the Muslim faith. They just automatically hate it because their religious leaders have automatically put that thing in their head, and have done apparently the research for them when they probably haven't even picked up a Quran in a sense. So I think it's really based off of I think honestly, as a leader and as a person that who's going to be the voice for an entire community, you need to make sure that you are on good standing with your community. So yeah.
I got a couple other. I want to kind of give you the floor a little bit. I mean, I don't want to. I want to end on a positive, because, like we said at the beginning, and some of the things that you've already talked about, there's a lot of positive things going on. You got Luscombe Days coming up. You're going to have the most fabulous float ever in that parade. You've got the Pride Society continuing to be formed. What is it you want people to hear? What is it you want people to know?
Yeah. I think the message of Pride this year was very much of um it wasn't so much about love is love anymore. It was about, we are here and we're queer and we're not going anywhere. Like, we've always been here. We've always existed, whether you've seen us or not, whether we've been out or not. And I think for us, we want to make sure that everyone in our community, but everyone in surrounding smaller communities that watch our things, that they know that there's always someone fighting for their community, fighting for the people that live within their marginalized minority. That there's someone out there that's saying no to the hate, and that they don't have to keep fighting alone, and they don't feel like they have to keep fighting alone. Because that was one of the biggest things when I started the Pride Society, was I felt very alone. I felt that I could not exist in the town that I called home. I felt that there was no community around me that would support or champion me to be the best person I was, which was completely false once I found, and once I did digging, and once I started learning and asking people about who they were. There really is a community of people here that want to make it better and are eager to make connections and to find all these things, and really do great positive work in our community to help other people understand the struggles that different people face that are not a part of the everyday norm, or not a part of society in the societal capitalist context. And so for us, we really want everyone to know that you're loved and safe, and that there is someone fighting for you, and that you don't have to do it alone, that you're surrounded by people, whether you know them or not, that care about your existence, and they are not going to change that. They're not going to find out who you are and go, oh, well, you're that, so we're not really gonna champion you or love you. It's no. I think I saw a video that spoke volumes to me this week, and it was a guy holding a sign in a pride or just on the side of a pride parade, and it said, "Recovering bigot. I'm sorry, free hugs." And people came out of the parade to go and give him a hug, and they're like, "Thank you, you're doing great, like, keep it up." And it was this understanding that transcended the boundaries of knowing who that person is, but knowing that they are human, and that they make mistakes, and that they are supported even when they stumble and fall, but when they realize their mistakes even more, they are still supported in that sense. And so I think with our Pride Society, we really like push that, and we push the sense of community, that your community is your community, and you should not have to leave your home to find that. You should not have to fear being out in public, being yourself, because it's something that someone might say. You should never have that. You should never be afraid to exist, and to live your truth. In your hometown. And so that's why, like, again, like, we're having a Pride weekend from August 25th to the 27th. And why we kind of did it in August was because we wanted, again, to champion the community. We wanted it to be about, not about these big organizations that go, oh, we're here for Pride, oh, we're doing this, oh, we're doing that. But it focused on us. It focused on the needs of this community. It focused on what things we really want this community about, and what the community wants us to do. So we're doing like a Pride in the Park, where we're trying to get some drag queens and vendors and things to come, and we're trying to have a queer, BIPOC, Indigenous market set up there, and do all that fun stuff, and really show this community that we're people, and that we deserve to celebrate who we are together as a community, whether you're an ally, whether you're LGBTQ, whether you, excuse me, whether you don't even know about what the acronym even stands for. You don't have to understand a group of people to understand the human behind them. You don't have to understand everything about who they are in order to care about them and to love them. You should just be able to look at them as humans and go, okay, they're different than me, but I still am going to champion them to be the best that they could be, because you don't want anyone to feel left out or alone or afraid, honestly. Yeah, honestly, like, I think it's very much of a great movement forward, but as a society, yeah, we just really want everyone to know that they're cared for and loved for, and that there is always someone fighting for them, whether or not they know it or not.
I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today, and I hope that you
Yeah,
keep us in the loop
yeah,
um,
definitely.
with the ongoing planning for conversations, I guess we have to say, with
Yeah,
Jennifer Johnson, and I hope that she does. It's on a balance of probabilities. I'm probably being a little optimistic, but I would love for this story to be able to end with her taking responsibility for what she
yeah,
did
oh,
instead of minimizing it, and correcting
yeah,
some of the misinformation that she put out there.
yeah, definitely. I would love to see that as well, and I hope that through our communication with her, that is something that she'll start to realize, and that she'll start to see the harm that she has done, but also see that queer people just want her to be better. Like, we don't hate her. I think that's something that a lot of people think that we automatically equate her to, is that we absolutely hate her. It's no, we just want you to understand who we are as people, because once you understand who we are as people, then you can make the decision of whether or not you want to hate us. But until then, just find out who we are. Don't take misconceptions and run with them. Just sit down, talk with us. We're not going to hate crime you. We're just going to talk with you about things that you can do better, to be more of an advocate for people.
Awesome. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.